We need to be honest for a moment. Somewhere along the way, adventure motorcycles stopped serving adventure and started serving ego. Each new generation grew taller, heavier, stronger, and more complicated, while most owners never left the pavement. The industry insisted this was progress. Bigger engines, more power, screens glowing like tablets. Meanwhile, riders quietly struggled to lift their own machines after a simple tip-over. And that's why we're dealing with a breaking point today. Because in 2026, the adventure motorcycle segment is being forced to correct itself. In this breakdown, you'll see why manufacturers are moving away from heavy, complex, big ADV and back toward lighter, sub-500cc machines, and why that shift directly impacts rider confidence, control, and real-world freedom on both road and trail. But to understand why this shift is happening and why it's long overdue, we need to look back at how we got here. Adventure motorcycles were never meant to be intimidating. In their earliest form, they were problem solvers, not status symbols. These bikes were built to cover long distances on bad roads, to survive being dropped, and to keep moving when pavement disappeared. Riders packed light, relied on simple mechanics, and trusted machines that felt manageable rather than heroic. You could lift them after a mistake, fix them with basic tools, and ride all day without feeling like the bike was daring you to fail. That balance began to shift when competition stepped into the spotlight. Desert racing captured imaginations, and success on brutal rally stages quickly became a marketing weapon. Speed sold stories. Bigger engines promised dominance. Larger fuel tanks suggested freedom without limits. Suspension numbers grew because bigger numbers always looked better on a spec sheet. None of it was irrational on its own. Each upgrade sounded like progress. Magazines praised the evolution, and glossy ads framed adventure riding as something extreme, cinematic, and larger than life. Slowly, the message changed. Adventure stopped being about access and started being about conquest. These motorcycles grew taller, heavier, and more complicated. Prices climbed along with expectations. What once felt welcoming now demanded confidence before the key was even turned. A simple parking lot maneuver became stressful. A tip-over became expensive. The idea of wandering off the map started to feel risky instead of liberating. The industry did not lose its way out of arrogance. It followed excitement, prestige, and the loudest success stories. But somewhere along that path, it drifted away from how most riders actually explore the world. By the middle of the 2020s, adventure bikes had become impressive machines that many riders admired more than they rode. And that growing disconnect is exactly what forced the next chapter to begin. And before we break down how the adventure segment lost its way, if this sounds familiar, take a second to support the conversation. Hit the like button, drop a hype, and subscribe. That simple action is what keeps us committed to delivering clear, honest breakdowns of where the adventure motorcycle world is really headed. For a while, the growth of adventure motorcycles felt like progress. More horsepower suggested effortless highway miles. Advanced electronics promised control in every situation. On pavement, the formula worked. These bikes were stable, fast, and comfortable at speed. But the moment the road turned to dirt, the experience changed in ways few riders expected. Once fully fueled, many modern adventure motorcycles weigh well over 500 pounds. Off-road, that mass behaves differently. Momentum builds quickly. Balance becomes fragile. Tight trails and uneven surfaces demand constant attention. What was supposed to feel freeing starts to feel demanding. Riders find themselves managing weight instead of enjoying terrain. Anyone who has tried to pivot a large adventure bike on a narrow forest track understands the tension immediately. Heart rate rises, grip tightens, every foot dab feels consequential. One slip on loose gravel, one misjudged camber, and the bike goes down. Lifting it back up is no longer a matter of technique alone. It becomes a physical challenge that drains energy and confidence. Many riders never say it out loud, but the thought is there. I avoid rough sections because I do not want to deal with the consequences. Power adds another complication. Off-road, throttle inputs need restraint. Too much too quickly can overwhelm traction before the rider can react. Electronics step in to help, but they bring menace, modes, and decisions that pull attention away from the ride itself. Instead of reading the trail, riders adjust settings and second-guess choices. Gradually, routes get shortened, obstacles get bypassed, exploration turns cautious. These motorcycles can cross continents, but only under the right conditions and with the right rider. That realization sparked a fundamental question among riders. What if control mattered more than peak output? What if balance mattered more than size? That question didn't stay theoretical for long, because once riders began asking it, the industry was forced to look beyond marketing and toward reality. This shift toward smaller adventure motorcycles is not happening in isolation. It is being driven by how the rest of the world actually rides. Outside a handful of wealthy markets, most riders are not cruising at 80 miles per hour with hard cases and a passenger. Roads are slower, fuel is expensive, maintenance matters, and motorcycles are expected to work every day, not just on vacation. In large parts of Asia, South America, Africa, and Eastern Europe, average speeds are low and conditions are unpredictable. A massive engine offers no real advantage there. What it does bring is higher purchase cost, higher fuel consumption, and higher repair bills. Import taxes and tariffs amplify the problem even further. A motorcycle that feels mid-sized in the United States can become an unreachable luxury elsewhere. Smaller adventure bikes fit these realities far better. They deliver usable performance without excess. They sip fuel instead of draining tanks. They are easier to service, easier to transport, and easier to live with long-term. That practicality turns them into premium machines in developing markets, while still remaining affordable and unintimidating in developed ones. There is also the human factor. Riders around the world come in different sizes and shapes. Extremely tall seat heights and 500-pound curb weights exclude far more people than they include. A lighter, lower, more balanced motorcycle welcomes a broader range of riders, regardless of age, strength, or experience. That universal accessibility is rare in modern motorcycling. For manufacturers, this creates something powerful: a single platform that works almost everywhere. One motorcycle that can commute during the week, explore on the weekend, and sell globally without major compromises. And with that in mind, I want to hear from you. Which of these points stood out the most to you? Do you relate to the challenges of tall, heavy ADVs, or have you experienced the freedom of a lighter, more manageable bike? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and let's talk about how real-world practicality should shape the future of adventure motorcycles. Adventure motorcycles are sold as global machines, but the world does not ride the same way everywhere. In Europe, tight mountain passes, uneven pavement, and wet cobblestones reward balance and precision, not excess power. In large parts of Asia, Africa, and South America, riding often begins where pavement disappears entirely. Dust, broken surfaces, river crossings, and long gaps between fuel stops are normal conditions, not special occasions. In North America, vast gravel networks and backcountry discovery routes attract riders who want distance and solitude more than outright speed. A single motorcycle cannot dominate all of these environments, but lighter adventure bikes adapt to more of them than heavy ones ever could. Large displacement adventure machines shine on wide highways and long touring days. Once infrastructure becomes inconsistent, their advantages fade quickly. Fuel efficiency matters more than peak output. Reliability matters more than screens and sensors. The ability to diagnose and fix simple issues far from a dealership becomes critical. In many places, a straightforward mechanical design is not a preference. It is a requirement. There is also an access problem. Extremely tall seat heights and 500-pound curb weights quietly exclude riders who are shorter, older, or simply realistic about their limits. Smaller displacement adventure, motorcycles lower that barrier. They feel welcoming rather than demanding. They invite participation instead of postponement. Cost reinforces this divide. In many markets, a flagship adventure bike costs as much as a car. Meanwhile, a 300 to 450 cubic centimeter adventure motorcycle remains attainable, economical, and durable. That is not compromise. That is design aligned with real life. As this demand becomes impossible to ignore, manufacturers are being forced to respond, and doing so requires more than new models. It requires a fundamental change in how these motorcycles are engineered. Once the push for lighter, more approachable adventure. Motorcycles became undeniable. Engineers did more than downsize engines. They changed the way they thought about performance altogether. Instead of chasing peak output and layered complexity, development teams refocused on fundamentals that actually matter off pavement: balance, durability, efficiency, and predictability. The objective was not to reduce capability, but to make every bit of it usable. Chassis design tells that story clearly. Frames are no longer heavier than necessary. Strength now comes from smarter geometry, improved steel compositions, and modular platforms that can serve multiple models without excess bulk. Engines follow the same logic. Single-cylinder and compact twin layouts deliver strong, controllable torque at low revs, exactly where trail riding and rough terrain demand it. Rather than overpowering the rider and correcting behavior. Electronically, these motorcycles are calm and cooperative by nature. Electronics have not vanished, but their role has changed. Instead of overwhelming dashboards and endless submenus, most lightweight adventure bikes focus on essentials: anti-lock braking systems that can be adjusted for dirt, simple traction control that works quietly in the background, occasionally a rain setting for poor conditions. These systems assist rather than distract. With fewer layers, reliability improves and ownership becomes less intimidating, especially far from dealerships. Manufacturing choices reflect this shift as well. Shared components, simplified engines, and reduced complexity, lower production costs and long-term ownership expenses. That translates directly into accessibility. More riders can afford these bikes, maintain them confidently, and actually use them for what they were built to do. Yet this return to simplicity has not produced a single blueprint. Brands are experimenting with different engine layouts, materials, and suspension philosophies. That diversity signals something important. The segment is evolving again, and no one wants to miss what comes next. When manufacturers finally committed to smaller, more approachable adventure motorcycles, the segment did not converge on a single formula. It fractured in the best possible way. Instead of copying one successful layout, brands began exploring different solutions to the same problem. Single-cylinder engines focused on simplicity and low-end pull. Compact parallel twins aimed for smoother highway manners. Some designs prioritize rugged durability, others lean toward refinement. Each approach reflected a different interpretation of what modern adventure riding actually demands. This variety is not a lack of direction, it is evidence of momentum. The industry is no longer chasing one flagship benchmark. Engineers are testing ideas again. Stroke lengths are being tuned for controllable torque rather than peak numbers. Engine layouts are chosen for balance and packaging, not bragging rights. Electronics are treated with restraint. Some bikes offer only essential braking assistance. Others add lightweight traction control or ride-by-wire, but only where it improves control instead of replacing rider input. Chassis design shows the same experimentation. Steel frames are shaped to flex predictably and survive hard use. Subframes are lighter and easier to repair. Fuel tanks are positioned lower to improve balance. Suspension travel is selected for real terrain rather than marketing comparisons. These decisions vary by region because riding conditions vary by region. This period will not last forever. Over time, certain solutions will prove themselves and become standards. Others will quietly disappear. But right now, the uncertainty is productive. It means manufacturers are listening instead of assuming. And those experiments are no longer confined to prototypes. They are arriving in showrooms, ready to be ridden, dropped, and judged where it actually matters. And this experimentation becomes real when those ideas leave the drawing board and show up in dealerships, motorcycles that riders can actually buy, ride, and test in the dirt themselves. The lightweight adventure revolution is not theoretical anymore. It is already rolling on two wheels. And before we dive into the specific models leading this movement, I want to hear from you. Which of these design experiments excites you the most? Have you ever ridden a bike that felt more manageable and confidence-inspiring because it was lighter or simpler? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit the like button if you are ready for a more approachable adventure, and subscribe to follow the shift as it continues to reshape the segment. This shift towards smaller adventure motorcycles is no longer an idea being debated in design studios. It is already happening, and the evidence is sitting on dealership floors right now. The motorcycles leading this movement are not concepts or compromises. They are fully formed answers to a problem riders have been living with for years. The KTM 390 Adventure R was one of the first to break the illusion that serious off-road capability required excessive size. It was not positioned as a beginner bike, and it never felt like one. Long travel suspension, upright rally-inspired ergonomics, and a willingness to be ridden hard off pavement made its point clear. Weight matters. Control matters more. Riders discovered that confidence grows faster on a motorcycle. You can actually manage when the ground turns unpredictable. Royal Enfield took a very different route with the Himalayan 450, and that contrast is important. This bike does not chase aggression or speed. It is calm, deliberate, and honest. Strong low-end pull, stable manners, and mechanical simplicity make it feel cooperative rather than demanding. In places where pavement ends without warning and help is far away, that character matters more than horsepower numbers ever could. It is a motorcycle that rewards patience and trust, not bravado. Honda's NX500 brought a sense of Polish back into the lightweight adventure conversation. It showed that smaller displacement does not mean giving up comfort, durability, or long-distance ease. Smooth power delivery, excellent fuel efficiency, and a reputation for reliability make it the kind of motorcycle that fits into everyday life. Commute during the week, leave town on Friday, wander without stress. CF Moto entered the picture by changing the value equation. The Ibex 450 delivers modern features, adjustable suspension, and real capability at a price that lowers the barrier to entry. That matters because growth in this segment depends on more riders being able to participate, not just enthusiasts willing to spend big money. Kawasaki's KL500 reinforces that point. When a traditionally cautious brand commits to this space, it signals long-term intent, not experimentation. What is coming next strengthens the pattern. BMW's F450G aims to compress decades of GS identity into a size more riders can actually use. Aprilia's Touareg 457 promises sharper character without abandoning practicality. Each bike approaches the problem differently, but together they confirm something larger is taking shape. Seeing these motorcycles side by side, it is clear that something bigger than any single model is happening. But this is not just a lineup of new bikes. It is a sign that the industry itself is rethinking how adventure motorcycles should be built. What comes next is not about colors or features. It is about a fundamental reset that could redefine riding for years to come. For a long time, adventure motorcycles evolved through accumulation. Each new generation arrived with more horsepower, larger displays, deeper menus, and increasingly complex systems layered on top of one another. On paper, the machines looked extraordinary. In practice, they moved further away from the environments they were meant to explore. The issue was never incompetence. Manufacturers were doing exactly what the market seemed to reward. The problem was that the vision guiding those decisions slowly drifted away from where adventure riding actually happens. That drift is now being corrected, and the change is deliberate. Instead of stacking features, engineers are pulling mass out of the motorcycle. Instead of chasing peak numbers high in the rev range, engines are being tuned for usable strength where riders spend most of their time. Instead of endless configuration, menus control systems are being pared back to settings that function across pavement, gravel, and dirt without constant adjustment. This is not cost-cutting, it is focus. The deeper shift is in how these motorcycles are being designed from the ground up. New platforms are no longer adapted from street or touring machines. Frames are built specifically for mixed terrain. Suspension is selected for realistic speeds and repeated impacts, not bragging rights. Components are placed where they can be serviced on the road, not hidden for visual effect. Even conversations inside the industry have changed. Durability, ownership cost, and long-term reliability are now part of the headline, not fine print. That makes this moment different from past cycles. This is not a reaction to fashion or a temporary swing in taste. It is a course correction shaped by years of feedback and hard lessons. Lightweight adventure. Motorcycles represent a return to purpose. They prioritize reach over spectacle, confidence over excess, and function over impression. And that leads to the bigger picture, why this is not just a correction of past mistakes, but a deeper structural shift in how adventure motorcycles will be designed, ridden, and experienced in the years to come. So why are adventure motorcycles getting smaller again as we approach 2026? Because the industry finally remembered what adventure was meant to feel like. Not a contest of horsepower, not a comparison of screens and settings. Real adventure has always been about progress, about covering ground with confidence rather than carrying excess just to make a statement. For years, the segment chased larger engines, taller seat heights, heavier frames and dashboards that felt more like aircraft panels than motorcycle tools. Impressive to look at, yes, reassuring when traction disappears, not always. What is happening now is not a retreat. It is a realignment. Riders have been making the decision quietly, choosing motorcycles that invite exploration instead of intimidation. A 400 cubic centimeter machine that builds trust is far more valuable than a 1,200 cubic centimeter bike that creates hesitation. Confidence changes behavior, and behavior shapes the market. If the previous few years were about recognition, 2026 is about action. Usability is winning. Reach is replacing excess. Accessibility is no longer viewed as compromise, but as strength. The industry is not shrinking its ambitions. It is refining them. If this breakdown sparked your curiosity about the future of adventure, motorcycles and how real riders are shaping it, hit the next video on your screen. Smash that like, drop a hype, and subscribe for more insights, reviews, and tips to ride smarter, freer, and farther than ever before.